and best practices for Saudi Arabia. After this morning, when we actually concentrated on ESG certification, we talked about skill acquisitions. We're going to be talking today about the relation between mining operations and communities. And we have a wonderful panel to start that afternoon, moderated by Greg Radford, Director of the Intergovernmental Forum on Mining. He's going to be actually welcoming and discussing with our fine panel right here. First is Alicia Eastman, President of Intercontinental Energy. Then Jeff Geipel, Managing Director of Mining Shared Value. Alison George, Head of Programs and Initiatives at the Development Partner Institute. Jeff Townsend, founder of Critical Mineral Associations. And last but not least, Anna O'Farrell, Head of the Chairman's Office at Rio Tinto. Thank you very much. It's all yours.
Great. Thank you very much. Welcome everyone to our panel right after lunch. Appreciate everyone joining us. We're here to talk about kind of where are the benefits of mining for communities, and we're going to talk about that through the whole mine life cycle. And we've got a great panel that you heard, and we're going to bring different perspectives talking about the benefits of mining. You know, the mining sector, really promotes, benefits for mining, the optimization, the many great things that come out of mining to communities and to governments about kind of the need for mining, and the benefits to communities is one of the most important things, because these communities are often the most impacted by the operations, right? And so I think that this panel is really important to talk about, and it builds on the conversations that we've been hearing over the past couple of days about benefit optimization. So this afternoon we're going to focus on communities. We're going to be talking about different aspects, and then we're going to have a bit of a free-for-all conversation, picking up on what everyone else said. So when we think about and people talk about benefits to mining, one of the things often comes up is local content policies and kind of the promotion of kind of the economic impacts. So one of the biggest aspects of that is local procurement. So I'm going to ask Jeff Geipel to go first and get Jeff to share some of the key lessons that he's learned through Mining Shared Value on local content and how that can result in benefits to communities.
Great,
Jeff?
Thank you. As a first point, what I would say is that mining can no longer just do no harm. It has to create economic benefits. If it's going to be welcomed by host communities and wider host economies and governments, it's going to need to create lasting positive benefits. In our case, we focus on the issue of local procurement of goods and services, and that's because it's the single largest payment made by virtually all mine sites. And so if you're trying to find the development links from mining, we really think we should be focusing on local procurement. But I want to give credit to what the Kingdom is doing in terms of its policy. It is not just trying to do policies on local procurement and local hiring. It's all part of a wider industrial strategy, and that's the means to an end in terms of creating economic development. We've seen many countries, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, which have had high numbers of tax revenue and job creation from mining, particularly during the 2000s commodities boom. But in the end, when the boom went away, there wasn't a great deal to show for it in terms of new capacity, new technologies, new skills, which then could be utilized by other sectors. And so that kind of is our main message, is that mining provides a short-term window for the average mine site of 10, 20 years. And if it can be capitalized on in terms of procurement opportunities to create technology transfer, skills upgrading, that is the legacy that mining can leave behind. So that's our main message. I mean, in terms of lessons learned, I actually would say that the best examples of local content policy are actually right in this neighborhood in terms of the oil and gas industry. There's been some great local content policies put in place by Oman, by Saudi Arabia in oil and gas. And Nigeria also has some leading practices on this in Africa. But it's an issue that we're trying to get right, and we need to make a combination of government policies on the demand side, requiring companies to do local procurement, but then very importantly and crucially to support supply side policies, which is to say supplier development, finance for suppliers, and other various means like that. So.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. And as Jeff mentioned, local procurement is such a one of the greatest kind of multipliers. We've been hearing over the past couple of days of kind of the multiplier effect of mining, having a 5, 10, 15 time impact on money that comes in, and local content policies and local procurement are a very significant part of that. Another concept we've been hearing a lot about the past 2 days is ESG. We've heard about ESG, 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 and I find it interesting that I actually haven't heard really anyone say CSR yet. And for decades in the mining sector and other sectors, corporate social responsibility was kind of the concept, and really started on the philanthropy part of it, right? And so when we hear about ESG, it's really kind of I'll just describe it as kind of the transition from CSR to ESG. And so I'm going to ask Jeff Townsend, Jeff number 2, about kind of his take on this transition to ESG, and kind of where are we seeing the kind of the benefits to communities from that, and if you can share a specific example of kind of this transition to ESG.
Brilliant, thank you ever so much. And let's start by saying thanks for letting us all speak at the Future Minerals Forum, and thanks to the Kingdom for putting this on. It's an excellent, excellent conference. So yeah, talking about that, what we're starting to see is as we transition to this net zero economy, this future green economy, we're seeing investors, we're seeing society talking more about ESG. And they want to see that ESG in their downstream product. So they want to see their car, and through blockchain technology, you're able to track exactly what goes into your car, and you can track the ESG that goes along with that. And that differentiates from CSR. So I think when we were talking about CSR in the 80s and the 90s, it was very much a single project. It was very much a mining company or an upstream company going into a location and saying, we're mining here, here's a school, or here's a project that's going to work on a local wildlife thing. And it was one project, and it was almost forced upon the community about this is what we're going to do. And it was used as a mechanism of saying, aren't we wonderful, we're doing brilliant work. Now, that is great. It's good to be doing that work, but we need to do so much more. And so in the last 5 years, we've seen this transition to this ESG. And the way I've seen that is from individual programs to this collaboration and cooperation with the local community. So the local community saying, this is what we require, this is the partnership we need and want from the operators in this jurisdiction. And then that has been multifaceted. It's not just been one program, it's been multiple programs, so strengthening the resilience of the local community, the local economy. And I remember a story from Malawi where a mining company, they met a young boy, and he was on his way to the local town with some cokes in his tray and on his bike. And they drove past him in a car. And they said, well, we're going to this random location, can we buy the cokes from you? And he said, I need them from the local community. So they gave him 4 times as much as he wanted. They took the cokes, they put his car on top of the thing, they drove him back to where he'd just come from. Sorry about that. And then restocked him and took it back to society. That was great. But over the last 10 years, that's then grown. Through this child, they managed to communicate and engage with the community, understand what they needed. They built a working infrastructure around the economy. So they had a new superstore built where people could go and buy not just Coca-Cola or Pepsi, but they could buy food, drugs, equipment for their kids to go to school. And then around that, there was built all these different traders bringing different things in. And because they built the roads and because they built the infrastructure, they could take that and they could trade into the wider community. So it was really strengthening that community and giving them the capacity to be an active player regionally. I think that's what we're starting to see as the important, especially from investment and those looking at those downstream products.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate that. I'm going to ask Alicia as a project sponsor, project proponent, and we also have Rio Tinto with us as well. So what I'm hoping to get out of our panel today is some lessons learned and case studies, kind of take it from the theoretical down to the kind of the practical level. So as a project proponent, how can you structure projects to, to achieve and optimize kind of positive outcomes? And your company also works in the renewable space. So, and it's always, good practice to learn from other sectors on aspects, especially around community and economic benefits. Go share an example. And
Sure. So what we do are very large upstream wind and solar. I have the only microphone that works, apparently. We have upstream wind and solar, downstream green hydrogen and green ammonia. And all of our projects are extremely large. So there's 25 gigawatts plus of upstream, which means that we can create an ecosystem around our project. And what we've discovered is that you're talking about CSR moving into ESG, and what we now call ICV instead of other terms. But essentially, the complexity of the economy is what it gives you that resilience. It's what makes it a real place to live. And so when we look at these communities, which are basically deserts, because we are looking for a profile of a lot of sun during the day and a lot of wind at night. So they're kind of empty right now, and we're starting from scratch. We really want to have as many different industries there as possible to attract, not just because of the investment in the area, but so that the economy is more complex and more resilient, and not a banana, a banana republic. I mean, that's the reason you don't want a banana republic, is because you don't want to be dependent on one good. And you don't want a company town as well. You need to have more industries, more variability, so that, especially for mining, which is always temporary, as you said, it could be 20 years maybe, but usually it's like 5. And that's why they call it a boom town. And what happens in mining that is really difficult is that the people who work there are then stuck in a place that has only one place to eat, only one place to drink, only one place to socialize, and it's very, very expensive, because the person who opened that said, oh, this is a great place to open it, there's all these people coming to work. And at the end of the day, the workers have been separated from their families for years, and they don't have any money in their pocket. So I think for mining, first you have to fix the common problems. What typically happens in mining. Just first fix that. I agree, it's not enough to do no harm, but you definitely have to get there. And then you can add on things. And I think, so having just accessibility of products that are at normal prices, like almost if you think of the U.S. military, or any military, they're on these like carrier ships. They're a captive audience, but the U.S. always makes sure that there's like a super low price option for them at any shore. And you need to think about that these people are captive, and it just, as human beings, you have to think about how you can have them be happy in that situation. You have to have more options for lots of things, and you can't really overlook things like arts and education. And it's not all about roads and infrastructure. I do think renewable energy is a great way to solve one of the mining problems, which is usually some kind of pollution, and also leave something lasting for the community that is useful and helpful and can be built upon. So infrastructure is a really good thing for mining companies to leave as which is helpful. Ports, and there's all sorts of things in that category. But I think to the extent that you can introduce as much complexity as possible, that is actually what is going to give you that long-term, real city, real community feeling. And the best way to do that too is to talk to the community and really find out what they value, because not everybody values the same things. We have 2 projects in Western Australia, and there's all different indigenous populations, different native title holders that they don't all not care about money. They're actually all different. They're all very different from one another. And you need to talk to them about what it is that they value and how it is that you could bring to them what they value. And certainly not harm what they value. If it's, very, if it's land in the case of Australia, there's been a lot of damage done to traditional owners. We have a project in Australia. It's our second one. It's 50 gigawatts. It's very big. And we decided to partner with the traditional owners of that land. So the Murnine Nation, they have native title to that land. We gave them a stake in the project. They have a permanent seat on the board. And we have a charter so that we can't do anything to their land that they don't agree to. And we work with them about what do they think about what kind of architecture we should use. And we come up with interesting things that are really impact the lives of people living there. It's actually things you wouldn't think are valuable, and maybe you can't even put them on a spreadsheet and total it up and say, here's the ICV. Because it's how do you make things so that people can socialize together, so that families can be together, so that there's childcare that allows for different types of working. It's these things that are almost not tangible that really make a place a home. And I think that's what's generally missing in mining communities, because it is a short-term or shorter-term type of activity. So I think anything that you can do leaning in the opposite direction is quite helpful. And it also actually makes things easier. Our project in Australia, the second one, is so much easier working with the people instead of against or around, or somehow say, okay, we have to do this. When we engage actively, and sometimes they suggest things that are better than what we would have thought. And I think it's wholly much more satisfying for everyone in the process.
Thanks. And one of the key takeaways you mentioned is working with people. And when we're talking about communities and benefits, you can't do that without strong and collaborative partnerships. And Allison from DPI, that's the partnerships is kind of the foundation of why DPI was created. So can you kind of share some couple quick experiences of DPI's work on like how to optimize benefits between mining companies and communities?
Firstly, thank you for being here. I'm just humbled, excited, inspired by Saudi Arabia, and it makes me think about this broader definition of communities. I see that there's so much alignment in thinking about the human capital and people and the potential to unleash many different things. So a little bit about the Development Partner Institute. If you think about the traditional multilaterals like the World Bank, the UN outfits, or bilateral governments, there's a new type of way of thinking about partnerships with communities and companies and different multi-stakeholder arrangements, and DPI exists to facilitate and foster that. So at its simplest level, DPI is about accelerating mining for development and creating different multi-stakeholder forums to do that. And having conversations that aren't traditional, aren't usual, but also experimenting, so deploying and acting very quickly. When I think about communities, I think about a lot of our work is guided by the Development Partner Framework. And it navigates our work. And quite simply, we have 3 pillars, which are about shared purpose. And you think about before mine goes into operation, and long-term planning with the community. Flourishing ecosystems when we think about the environment. And of course, having competitive communities, competitive countries, and what does that mean when that thrives? So on a practical level, we have, we're working in Zambia, for example. We've created a multi-stakeholder forum across the value chain having conversations. And we want to take that to the level of conversations with the Northwestern region, which connects DRC and Angola. So it's a really good route, and there's a lot of potential. So it's actually DPI sitting down and facilitating conversations to design projects. So recently we came up with 40 projects with communities, and we whittled it down to agriculture. And that's coming from them. And we think about the linkages to infrastructure. Of course, it's not the only thing, but it's about co-designing with communities. They don't have to have, sometimes I think about the detachment we have with the checklist approach to saying this has been done, that's been done, but it's about people and their lives and having agency and choices over that. And you don't need to have the so-called best education in the world to be able to do that. And so that's one of the ways that we work. Another thing we do is called the Mining Innovation and Research Battlefield. So we launched this last year at the Mine in Indaba. And if you imagine Dragon's Den or the Investor Battlefield, you pitch your idea. And if you're a PhD student, it comes to life, it's funded. If you're from a mining community, even better, you've lived and breathed what the gaps may be. And so last year we had 3 runners-up. Obviously, one became a winner, but one was from a mining community and spoke so eloquently about the ambitions for her country in terms of education and health, but said we can start recycling waste from mining sites and using that to create hospital equipment or stationery, because I hear leaders talk about these ambitious targets, but there's no tools to actualize that. And she spoke very passionately, and DPI had created this to give the platform for young people and people from communities to speak about the things that they want. The third thing is around responsible sourcing. And sometimes that's conflated with responsible mining, but trying to understand how can people participate at different levels of the value chain. So we've done some work in Latin America and thinking about how artisanal miners can be part of that, often termed illegal mining. But they're already part of the value chain, and just bringing that to the fore and using that knowledge to bring them. We learned from the communities we spoke to there, we're not just environmental defenders, we're also can be part of the governance of mining. And there's a lot of knowledge that we can bring, and we want our children to go on to perhaps be miners one day, or we want this type of education, or we want to grow these types of things. So really getting that to that granular level. We also spoke to many young people and people from communities about their vision for 2040, as we've called it. We know we've got the net zero target of 2050, but there are young people now who are going to become of age. And so it's starting with the end in mind and not doing these quick fix things. And so I feel that, just to sum up, it really is about agency, not just the tick box exercise, moving away from risk, because communities can stop operations, mining operations, very quickly overnight, things can disappear. So it's also broadening that definition of what is a community. Is it just at the so-called local level, the country level? I see the experience of being in Saudi Arabia as one of feeling very humbled by the community experience of alignment and thinking about human capital and standing in the future of what can be created. And I think that's what I would say would enhance benefits for mining communities, those approaches. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. And that kind of leads nicely into the aspect of like what is a community. And we often think about communities as kind of people living close to a mine site. But as mining operations, as we know, for critical minerals, for example, so much new areas are going to have to be opened up. Well, these are going to be in more remote areas, right? And there's going to be more impacts on biodiversity, and so what is a community, and how can communities benefit in more rural or remote areas is actually quite an interesting conversation. And Anna, you were recently a board member on a mining company in the Amazon.
Yeah.
So can you kind of just share how do very remote communities benefit from mining operations?
Yeah, no, sure. Well, first of all, thanks a lot for the opportunity and for to the kingdom to opening this forum that is so important for the future, for the energy transition, and for this invitation to me. I'm not an expert in the matter. I'm just very passionate about it, and especially after this experience that you just mentioned in the last 2 years, that I've been the country manager for Brazil for Rio Tinto, and that I sit on the board on one of the joint ventures that we have there, that is based in the Amazon. And I think that, and it's of course very linked to what we have been discussing in these days here in the forum, we do not choose where resources are. They are where they are, and we have to go after them. And I think that most of the time, and we see that in history, they are in remote locations. In Brazil, what we see is that some of these resources, they are in they are sitting in the Amazon, which is already remote. And to give you an idea, some of the in this mine that is now 40 years old, the closest, I would say, commercial airport, it's 7 hours by boat up in the river. Some of the communities that are, like around the impact area of the mine, they are like the closest one 2 hours by boat, and the expanded one like 6 hours by boat. So it is very hard to bring this perspective to other countries and other geographies. We don't really know what is this reality. But I think that when we think about these remote locations and the impact and benefits that mining can bring, it can be really transformative. It can really it can transform lives, and it can do it like for generations. It can be transformative by many generations. And I think that one of the projects that I would like to highlight here that I have experienced there, and that I have seen, and I think it's one that has been running for a while, and now we are starting to see that at the operation. It's one that is linked to education. So it is about creating the opportunity for some of these, like the children from the community. We don't have usually in these remote areas. The state didn't get there yet. So usually the miners, we are explorers, we sometimes get there first. And in this specific location in Brazil, you don't have high schools. So kids, they don't have the opportunity to go to high school. And this is one of the things that the mining operation that we have there is bringing this opportunity for them. They come and they study with the kids of the employees. So the operation get the boat, transport them, bring them to spend the day in the mining village. You feed them, you give them choices. And I actually made the comment here on a few things that you were saying, because it's all about this long-term value proposition. And now we have in the mine a few of the employees that they came from this reality. They went through the program, they went to the high school that was funded and facilitated by the operation. There is also like a sponsorship of the university. If they want to go to the university, the mine contribute to and pay for this tuition, and then invite them to come and work for the mine, and also to develop other social initiatives with the community. So it's all about long-term value proposition, creating opportunities, but listening. I think that as an industry, we are still learning. We are learning that we need more dialogue. We learn that we need to listen more, as you were saying. It is multi-stakeholder perspective, and we need to do that together. I think that's something we've been learning a lot, and we have some of these projects that prove that the more we engage and the more we work as not as individuals but as collective, the more we can achieve.
Great, thanks. We've got 3 minutes left.
Oh.
So I'd like to just do kind of a rapid fire. Jeff Townsend, I use your last name because we get two Jeffs. Why don't you go first? And so just if everyone kind of like a key takeaway message, like what's like based on kind of what we've heard today and the theme of benefits to communities, what's kind of the key takeaway for you?
So I think from my perspective, is really mining works better when the community and the company are in collaboration and working together. We have to understand that what we saw in the 80s and the 90s, you can't get away with. All the power in the world is now in a mobile phone. You can take a photo, you can take a video, it can be on Twitter or LinkedIn or wherever instantaneously. And that's out there and it can't be taken back. So the community now has more power than it ever has. It should utilize that to ensure that when work is carried out, they have the agency and they have the ability to shape what happens around that.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. Alison, key takeaway for you?
I think the community is us as well, is my key takeaway. I think when we separate it, again, I think it becomes detached. So thinking about the community as ourselves and building from that, experimenting, piloting, having new conversations, doing things differently, thinking of new business models, and engaging with organizations like DPI to facilitate those conversations, because I think there is a new appetite for development partnership, and mining has to go hand in hand with development. Otherwise, it will be tragic, I think.
Anna.
Yeah, so I think that it's important to reflect how mining has this potential to change realities, to change lives. This is massive. This is a big responsibility. So the more we listen and we do that together, I think the better the outcome for the society it will be, not only for the host communities, but for our contribution as an industry to the society will be, I think, even better recognized, and we are even going to be able to value that better than we do today.
Great, thanks. Jeff?
My takeaway, the complexity. I really like that framing of things. I think we always think about linkages, whether they be procurement linkages, but really it is true. The more complex the community relationship with the company in terms of ties between the mining company and a vocational school, ties between the mining company's road and a shared use of that road, for example, I think it's a very useful kind of framing to discuss that if you're trying to make community development, the more comprehensive, the more in-depth, the more of an industrial strategy it is, the better. And moving away from just sort of pure jobs and pure tax revenue. It's got to be a much bigger picture. That's my takeaway.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, that's Harvard Kennedy School.
Okay. You didn't have to tell me that. You could have taken credit.
It's a great course, and we half of our company has actually taken it. But it basically is about how much complexity matters in creating an environment that's good to live in. I think one of the things I take away, because I'm not in mining, so I'm the only one here that's not actively in mining, although my supply chain depends upon it. I've noticed in renewables, in hydrogen, in this whole new hydrogen economy, we are going to have to do a lot of infrastructure investments, a lot of project finance. I mean, I feel like the last 30, 40 years of investment have been all light assets and high tech. And we're about to have a revolution of real projects, real things that have to be built everywhere. And this time, we have to build them with ESG in mind, with all of these old concepts of the CSR. But we have to build these projects thinking in the long term for those communities. And I think that it's in Saudi is a great place to say this, right? Because this is one of the few places where people do think long term, where things are thought out. What's this going to look like in 10 years or in 20 years? And a lot of the rest of the world, has become so short term. For companies down to the quarter, for governments down to the year. It really, we have to have a revolution in thinking about what's going to happen down the line. And I think that the whole vision, I'm mixing up Vision 2030 and decarbonization goals. But the whole thing about thinking about 2050 is net zero, or any of these ideas to decarbonize, they're all very long down the line. And I think this is the first time everyone in the world is actually kind of thinking, oh, maybe I should think about 30 years from now and not just 1 year from now. It seems the mining industry is there as well.
Thanks so much. That wraps up the time we have. Our next panel is ready to go. Can we get a round of applause for our panel?